civilization cycle, interviews experts and individuals who understand the intensifying cycle of economic, societal, and government upheaval, so you can stay ahead of the changes in our world and keep your family safe. Fortunately for us, we can recognize that we're at the precipice, a point in history where we can all see the cycle changing. Where we go from here is up to us. So let's start the conversation, and welcome to the show.
I'll pick up on it with you. Now, Trump's here, and he very well could be the overseer of the collapse and the bankruptcy of the United States. You know that it's going to happen within a 4-year window, and the 2030 agendas take us out to, at least from this point here, to 2028. So the 2030 agenda needs to be everything completed in the full restart by that point, not the collapse, the full restart. I encourage everybody to read the documents.
Welcome, Eagles, to another edition of Trad Cat Night. Special guest, exclusive podcast. Finishing up strong here with DAP 2030's own David DuByne, one of our longest tenured guests on the program. Right off the bat, California quake, but then there was like a swarm of I don't even know how many aftershocks there was, probably close to 100, if not more. Ton of quakes over in that area. And then sort of a ripple effect, as some of my earth changes experts have told me, the worst of the worst would hit the West Coast, sort of ripple on through the New Madrid, and eventually it would hit the East Coast. And I said, well, okay, this thesis is correct, and we should be seeing something in the Midwest, and we have in the New Madrid area with smaller quakes, in the 2 to 3.0 range. I think Ridgely on the border of Tennessee and Missouri, Marston, I think primarily was the area. So we'll see if anything happens here on the East Coast, but wanted to get your thoughts on the earth changes front. What do you make of the weird and wacky weather? Welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. And that quake swarm in California, quite the interesting thing. They're talking about readings of radiation following, and there's just a whole bunch of strangeness to it, I admit. The number of aftershocks, though, it seems to be quite normal. I mean, I lived in Taiwan for many a year, and when they would have a big one, like a 6.7 or something around that 7.0 magnitude, you get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of aftershocks just really close after. Usually you get a big one and then a second, a little bit smaller but very big one. If you got a 6.7, you might get a 6.0, and then between that, and there'd be rumblings and aftershocks for days and weeks, thousands and thousands of smaller ones. But since you mentioned the East Coast, not a lot of people know in South Carolina there is a fault line there. Now in the 1700s it went off. Like Charleston got wrecked, and a fair few other towns. They're not nearly as large as they are now today. And you got to go back into the early 1700s, and church bells were ringing over here in Tennessee. So South Carolina has its own fault zone. It's not very big, but it runs right through and it touches North Carolina. If that were to go off, that would be significant because the number of ports that are right there. Also a large number of dams that weren't wiped out in Helene or overtopped still are there that would be cracked. Like an enormous amount of infrastructure for barges and river traffic would get ruined instantly if that were to go off, and that would really put a dent into, think about all the highway bridges collapsing from the East Coast coming from Georgia, through North Carolina and that sort of area, Tennessee. I mean, there'd be a lot of damage to infrastructure. That one's not widely talked about. There's a couple outliers there. A lot of people know about New Madrid and all that, Mississippi River bridges have collapsed, but very few are focused on the South Carolina fault line.
Yeah, there's one in New York, New Jersey, too, a big one, major one in New York, New Jersey. I think it kind of almost runs through one of his residents up there in New York, New Jersey area. Now, you just mentioned an interesting point that just kind of dawned on me. Again, I can only speak from a Christian standpoint here. In Catholic prophecy, it basically foretells that due to a large amount of sin happening on the coastlines, that basically, it's going to be overrun. And you've seen the future scalar maps and U.S. Navy maps of America or whatnot. But you just raised an interesting point.
so you will always know what's for dinner.
We just saw what happened there on the West Coast. Yeah, was it, Russian Poseidon bombs being dropped or whatnot? I actually was saying that was more likely for the East Coast, so who knows? I know Mike Adams was talking about that, certainly a possibility with the radiation, being picked up, as you mentioned there a few minutes ago. But listen, the point I'm trying to get at here is as we head into 2025 and potential further supply chain breakdown, we got the port strike. We're going to revisit that probably. I think it's the second week, like the 15th or whatnot. But let's just say we have something like a scenario like that, 100 miles gone. You think about all the tragedy and the loss of life or whatnot, but no one would really be talking about how all the ports would be gone. Like, how would we even get stuff after the fact? You might know better since you follow us a little bit more. I'm wondering, are imports, is it largely just coming through ports and docks, or is some of this actually flown in? I got to think most of it's got to be coming in on ships. Well, what's your thoughts there? I mean, but if that's like something like that happens on the East Coast, we would be in real trouble.
Oh, so will the global financial markets. They would pretty much collapse in unison. Because you have to look at that. The amount of financial activity would cease, and until they really got an assessment if Washington was damaged or if New York was damaged or whatever, all the derivatives markets would start to come unwound. This whole thing, and since you were speaking of prophecy and waters and Baba Vanga, I'm not really, sure on the authenticity or the veracity of it, but suddenly over the last few days, been a lot of talk about when Syria collapses and Damascus is taken, that is the beginning of World War III, and the following spring, then something on orders of magnitude that everybody's aware World War III has started happens. See, that would be another global financial meltdown instantly. So you got to look at it in perspective of the shift has been broadcast. It's not going away. Every country and continent, bar a few countries, are moving toward this globalist technocracy, and involved to get us there is a full financial collapse and a reset into a digital format, a digital currency. Whatever form that takes, from distributed ledger settlement, or if it's a real world asset, as in your house or your car or a business or something tokenized with the value of it in a smart contract and wrapped, that's the direction we're going. But you have to destroy the old system first. So you start to look at all these things that are happening. Would it be a quake that would, do you know how unexpected that would be for an East Coast earthquake? That would be just so far mind-bending for people anyway, that the fear factor would be there. The economy would be ripped. And then if the war starts at the same time, or some kind of oil embargo comes in, like, look for all these, you're talking dark winter a lot there, Eric, but look at all these other events that could lead into a combo stew of nastiness.
Now, I've been talking about that potential New York, New Jersey fault line quake for a while. I wasn't aware of that South Carolina one, so I'm glad you brought that up. I'll have to dive into that one a little bit more. But in terms of what's in store here for the wintertime specifically, what are you taking a look at? Is it going to be as nasty as some are saying in terms of temperature-wise? What are you prospecting here?
I do believe that all the record floods that we've seen across the northern hemisphere, like a year's worth of rain in a day, half a year's worth of rain in a day, that is now translating into snowfall. And over the last, say, 3 weeks, I kept getting story after story where a year's worth of snowfall had fallen in a single storm. Half a year of snow in a single storm. This record flood is now translating into record snowfall. So I would say, just from like an easy napkin math here, that every snow record pretty much across the entire northern hemisphere is going to be broken. Because look at this rainfall totals. We're talking about precipitation in terms of different measurements. So everybody across that's listening to my voice and Eric's right now, you've seen or read about record floods everywhere on the planet right now. North, southern hemisphere, both. Now turn that into snowfall. And is our infrastructure ready for that? And are our governments prepared enough for that? I'm going to say absolutely not. That's what I'm looking at.
Let's tie these two loose ends together and get your thoughts on Trump tariffs. How is this going to play out? Again, talking tough here with Canada, Mexico. Does it tie in ultimately with the formation of the NAU, the North American Union? Formerly, we were talking about NAFTA, many decades ago. Now, all of a sudden, I guess they're changing around the lingo. I think Trump even mentioned the other day something about Canada and Mexico being absorbed into us, and they couldn't handle the tariffs or something along those lines. I'm kind of paraphrasing right now, but what is that going to do to our economy too? Is this going to lead to more inflation?
Again, it comes right back to the economic reset to get us into a digital system. Now, in your right mind, if you're going to come out blazing and telling everybody 100% tariff, 100% tariff, 100% tariff, okay. But China right off the get-go, like just days later, are like, all right, we're cutting off all of your gallium, all your galenium, all your antimony, no more. And they also cut off the rest as of Monday, all of the rare earth oxide exports out of China. So America gets zero anymore. And instantly they're like, oh no, the whole aerospace industry, oh no, this, that, oh please, we got to find secondary suppliers. But that's great, you can't. China controls 90% of a lot of those rare earths on the production. Because all the NIMBYs were like, not in my backyard. Well, I get it, I don't want to strip mine in my backyard either. But the reliance that we put on these metals for our high-tech industries and society allows those who said, okay, 100% tariffs, cool. We're not even going to sell it to you. So China was the first. Now, also, I've been reading, I like to read Russian news and African news a lot. And the hearsay in Russia is no formal announcement yet, but America still relies, even with all the sanctions, and this is a fictitious, smoke and mirror mirage world that we're living in, still imports almost all of our uranium for our plants here for electrical generation from Russia still. Still, with all the sanctions we have, and they're still trading uranium with us. So Russia is going to cut off the uranium for us also. So that's two major countries. Now, the messaging's getting out. If they tell you 100% tariff, just cut them off, because America needs the raw materials more, because we don't manufacture anything, we don't mine anymore, we don't produce, we don't refine, we don't smelt, we don't know anything anymore here. So talking 100% tariffs, again, we're coming into a collapse phase. That is only going to do, it's just going to cut off everything coming into America. And what way to fast track a collapse would be just to do that. They knew that would be the response. You give me 100% tariff, well, what's the country's going to do? They've already gamed it out. They knew that would be the response after they mentioned that.
Well, I've also said this too, many, many years ago. There's a lot of people who made money on Bitcoin. I've actually had a few of my followers that did very well with Bitcoin. But I said, listen, it's sort of like a short-term intermediary play. You can do it. But the long term of this is it's not going to be viable. Like, it's CBDC or bust, and including here in the United States. Do you think ultimately this is going to be a showdown, or the next showdown is BRICS versus Bitcoin? And then, like I said, they pull the rug out beneath our feet on the Bitcoin side of things. I saw a few pretty good researchers that seem pretty legit to me. My presence on X or Twitter is mainly just to regurgitate news at this point. I saw a few good researchers indicating that it's a creation of the NSA, Bitcoin. So we know that's not a good thing. And if Trump's like saying, yeah, this thing's, we're going to be the capital of the world for Bitcoin, and kind of keep pushing it, moving it forward, and it'll go up to 200K or whatnot. I mean, I just see that thing. It's going to collapse one of these days. I don't know how. I'm not like an expert. I don't know the inside out as to exactly how that could happen. But so is this a BRICS versus Bitcoin showdown, the next stage, you think?
That I can't attest to, and I don't really have that many thoughts on the BTC, but I will go deep for you on the entire ecosystem, at least from my perspective. Now, again, this is not financial advice. It's just the blueprint that has been laid out. So as we move into a digitized world with biometrics and everything track and trace, think about the enormity of data that's going to require. Also, with LiDAR scanning of resources, to have that on the blockchain for carbon credits each year, like the amount of data, just running that real world asset class of carbon tokenization is going to be what we would consider like supercomputer usage just for that one little tiny fraction of assets on the planet. So moving forward, aside from Bitcoin, this whole digital ecosystem is growing and is morphing into it is absolutely, and planned to be, through all the papers I've ever read, is in progress right now of becoming the way that we will transact for at least anybody listening for the rest of your lifetimes, if you can hear these words today. Unborn children, not sure yet, but anybody alive today, even if you're 10 years old, this will be the rest of your life. Think about post-World War II. That's kind of the change we're looking at. It's going to be a full 80 years plus of new system in place. So there's three aspects to it. You're going to have the settlement, and you're going to need the speed, and you're going to have everything wrapped in tokenized on real world assets, or RWAs. So that ecosystem revolves around Quant in the center, And this blockchain thing is moving anyway. Like you hit it on the head. It's only an intermediary step. Blockchain, for all of you, unbeknownst, this is the middle step to move us to Hashgraph. Whatever's on blockchain based right now is going to be switched over to Hashgraph. Like the settlements are almost instantaneous. And when we come into speed, we're talking about the entire world's financial system running on that. But again, how every world asset, including your house, changes by the second or by the minute, readjusted for the price variables in the movements, times trillions of assets, times trillions of movements of dollars and money and tokens. So we're talking about quadrillions of computations per minute being moved through and settled out through this, whatever layers they're going to use on it. It could be something like, I don't know, what XRPs on this ledger system, or Hashgraph in itself, settlement speeds. This is what it's going to be. These wrap contracts in Ethereum, and now there's a whole bunch of other that are competing with Ethereum, like Sway and Solana. It depends if they can, wrap into RWAs, and that becomes, and it's not just Ethereum based, so there's a multi-ecosystem of that. But they all need to land somewhere. That's the whole thing. Bitcoin aside, that's sort of like a money thing. Just think of it as money sitting on the side, gold or whatever you want to do. It's on the desk over there. It doesn't move, slow, clunky. We're talking about something that moves at tenths of a thousandth of a second in settlement. Quadrillions of computations and settlements per day on the same systems, and the only one that can accomplish that is Hashgraph. The settlement, the speed, you're going to have other tokens like XLM, which is stellar, which has already been chosen as the buy a pack of gum coin for everybody else out here in the world who didn't get Bitcoin. XRP is going to be the main ledger for now, but we are moving over. So if you look at Quant and Hashgraph, those are the two big ones that are going to run the entire system from now. And if you look at the ISO 2022 tokens, there's only a handful. Those are going to be the tokens that are going to be used in the new world's ecosystem. So you can see everything that's not there, not going to be used in mass and in volume. Those tokens on that list, and there's only about 7 of them, is the new world's ecosystem revolving around that tech, that settlement, that speed, and that asset tokenization. That's where the world's moving to. Once you understand just those 7 things alone, you will see the future so clearly. I'm trying to forecast the future myself, but the old system needs to collapse. The old one needs to go away completely before the new one can come on. And they are in a rush to get the new one on. So whatever's happening, it's going to be happening really quick here.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out. I certainly have seen XRP pop up with a lot of people too. So we'll see what direction that kind of takes shape. Now, with 2025 being right around the corner, more talks of famines, fierce food prices at this stage in the game. David, let's transition to a little prepping talk right now. What would be some of the items that you would be picking up right now at the prices that you can get them at? I had one of my guests on the other day, and I bring on so many people, I forget who was talking about it, but they were noticing even in the Walmarts, their egg shortage, eggs. I'm trying to remember, he mentioned like 2 or 3 other things too as well. But what are you taking a look at here for 2025 in terms of getting the things that we can get at decent prices? Let's just say decent prices in comparison to what they'll be.
Well, you're going to have to kind of expand your envelope of shopping stores that you go to. If you're only going to like Costco and that's it, well, you might have to spend the extra $100 and go to Sam's. You might have to start hitting all the ethnic supermarkets around you. You might have to start making a tour of regular supermarkets. I know things are much smaller, a little more expensive. Some specialty items that you can find. I mean, each city probably has 5 or 6 different supermarket chains operating there. You actually probably need a map to make a food map of your area. Okay, Costco's over here. And then you can do a loop so you can quickly, instead of driving from one end of the town to the next, I forgot over here, I got to go way back to the other side of town, and just do a circle, and take a look at what foodstuffs are available or not, and make a journal every time you go in. So if you're going to go to a store, make note of what's missing, because it's not going to be missing forever. They do these shortages like whack-a-mole. There's an egg shortage, bring it up in the news. Oh, everybody runs and buy eggs. Okay, and then suddenly there's a glut of eggs on the market. Then the next thing goes and whatever. Oh, there's no more fresh fish. Oh no. And everybody's rising all the fresh fish. And then suddenly there's a glut of fresh fish because everybody's trying to sell it in the market. Food prices at a 19-month high from the World Food Organization, or the FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. 19-month high for food prices, but they're patting themselves on the back. Oh, it's not the highest ever. Veg oils, that was the whole thing, is the largest rise in that entire food price for this last few months was 32% rise compared to the same month, last October. So the vegetable oils have gone up the most in price. So I'm wondering, veg oils are usually the easiest thing to produce. You got corn oil, you got soy oil. Why is there suddenly not enough of that? Like, what's going terribly wrong where they keep telling us it's overabundance? Oh wait, I forgot, Africa. South Africa went offline for their corn production. So they have to import corn. Now, generally, South Africa is the largest exporter inside Africa to other African nations. They usually export about 10 million tons a year to other African nations, but this year they don't have any corn production because of the obscure weather and strangeness that they need to import corn. That creates a deficit. Now, also Ukraine, the 30 million tons of export, most of that was to Africa, really, straight to Africa, and, that's gone too. Suddenly we got these 2 areas that would produce corn oil that are offline. So I could see why it would be a rise in seed oils. But I don't understand why there's not. That doesn't make sense for me, because there was supposed to be a glut of soy this year, which is soy press cake, soy oil. But I'm just not seeing it in the numbers. FAO prices jumping this much means somebody's lying somewhere. Yeah, you see how they do it? And again, with the Federal Reserve, they give you a 1% raise in your wages, and they pat themselves, oh, everybody got a raise of 1%. But wait, your standard rate for 2% inflation just meant I still lost 1%, but they're cheering themselves on the news like, we gave everybody 1%.
But anything like non-food related items that people need to get in on before it's too late, especially price-wise?
Yeah, rechargeable flashlights, hanging lanterns, this sort of thing. And I'm not talking about ones that use rechargeable batteries. It's the one where they're already at one contained unit and you plug it in and you can recharge your headlamps, torches like flashlights, and then also lanterns that you can carry with you or hang up in a space to illuminate at night without having to use electricity and turn on your lights. But to get a good handful of those, because you can recharge those off of a solar power unit, and a handful of headlamps, flashlights, and rechargeable lanterns will get you through the night, and you will not have to turn a single light on in your house. These are the things not a lot of people are thinking about. They're thinking about like having one, because, if the power goes out, I'll get that, and then we can go get something else for more power. I think you're going to need a set of those for every room in the house, because they're so easy to recharge, and then also multiple charger cords. and multiple USB outlets into the charger, so you could recharge 8 of those at one time out of one socket. If we can do something more efficiently for lighting from the sun, from a solar pack of, whatever it is, an EcoFlow with the panels that you do, or whatever it is, a Jackery unit, could be anything. Because if you can have the light and you can have that at night, that is going to save you an enormous amount of heartache. Because you can do things at night. Without the light, you're stuck. Once the sun's down, you're done. You need to be able to work longer hours, because if all those people are inside because of safety reasons, you probably don't want your house looking like a Roman candle and Christmas tree anyway. You probably want to put bags over the windows and then be like going by lantern light so people don't see an enormous amount of lights.
Get all that stuff up, curtains around the place. That was one of the first things I did with this house. But yeah, you also, with most of those candles, they have like nasty soy in it, and it's just not good for your health. Even the diffusers, they're saying, are not good really to breathe in these days. At least some of them are, some researchers. So yeah, no, I'm right there with you. I'm really honing in down on protecting your property, defending your fortress, so to speak. But I'm wondering for you, since you certainly have more property probably than most people listening to this program, homestead considerations, when you've got more turf to deal with and the more territory that you have, the more difficult it's going to be to kind of secure it. So I'm just kind of curious if you want to give us some thoughts for those. And we certainly have people who have homesteads listening to this program, who have some land to it. Like, what's some of the things that you were going to kind of take a look at there?
Well, you need to assess first if you're getting the mind game put onto you in terms of how much threat there really is. I mean, just news stories can scare everybody enough. So perhaps this only occurs in like 10 cities and there's some violence, but it seems like it's happening across the entire United States, How viable is that threat really in your area is the first thing you need to look at. Or are you being mind played on the whole thing? That's something not a lot of people are looking into in their assessments. Is it even real what they're telling you? Because if you're not seeing it or hearing erupting around your area, then you're being played is what you're being. And this is the whole thing. How much of it is a mind game versus how much of it is real? Through the panic button press, they only need a couple of incidents in a couple cities in the news to run with it before everybody thinks it's happening everywhere. And to answer your question, no, you can defend down to your very last room in your homestead. Homesteads are just like homes. Yeah, you got vast area. You might know the terrain a little bit better, but I would not be bugging out into the forest to try to hold my ground from my house. You might have somebody, in a terrain area on an entrance into, because they're not going to be like crawling through the back of your forest through hundreds of acres to get when they could come up a dirt road or come up a gravel road with a bunch of SUVs. Like the easiest point of entry is going to be the easiest point of entry because you're dealing with a lot of amateurs here. It would be neighbors coming together to try to prevent something. And until you get incurred into, or their probes or something like this, I'm just wondering how much of it's fake news, literally, for your mind to believe it's real. And take it through that lens first.
But I think you would agree with me on the fact that, like, once this collapse happens, you're certainly going to have a situation where there's going to be a lot of unprepared people. And you know what happens after, about day 3 or so, especially, water side of things. There's going to be a lot of lunatics out there. So, and who knows when the actual collapse will happen. So we don't know where that is kind of on the timeline. More than likely, you're going to be dealing with people, period. I think that was pretty much represented in that Jericho series. And then like people coming into your area, probably wanting to partake in what you're doing kind of thing. And you got to make that decision. Okay, do I let this pack of 12 to 24 people stay with me? Kind of, there's all kinds of stuff we don't really think about. Potential scenarios which I think you have to think about ahead of time. You know what I mean? I think you have to really prepare for as much as possible. That's what I try to do every night, David, like at least for 15 minutes, like on the prepping sort of survival side, is think of different scenarios I'll have to deal with, potentially my own area, and think about ahead of time, think this out ahead of time before we even get into that scenario. That way I at least have my head somewhat squared on. Because, it could be a shocker, look out your window and you see 20 or 30 people. You could go into flight or fright mode. So that's why I like to think a lot of these scenarios out ahead of time. But what's your thoughts on that?
I'll pick up on it with you. Now, Trump's here, and he very well could be the overseer of the collapse and the bankruptcy of the United States. you know that it's going to happen within a 4-year window. And the 2030 agendas take us out to, at least from this point here, to 2028. So the 2030 agenda needs to be everything completed in the full restart by that point, not the collapse, the full restart. I encourage everybody to read the documents. So between now and 2030, that's 5 full years of time, the collapse needs to happen, the complete evaporation. And collapse is a bad word to use. Evaporation of the old system to nothing. Literally nothing exists. So their only choice is we're not going to rebuild a parallel system from the same one we have, and then plus the new digital infrastructure on the crypto and the CBDCs and all that stuff, and the blockchain and the RWAs and the settlement layers. That's all going to be the only thing that is built and comes back off of. And the gold will back part of it, but the rest of it's going to be digitized assets. So between now and then, the complete collapse needs to occur. Now, will it happen directly right after inauguration? I doubt it. Will it dovetail through 2026 and 27? Oh yeah, I bet it does. That collapse period too, you got to realize that more people are going to come together than they are going to fight. Small towns are going to rely on people in the same small town to protect their small towns. So your greatest threat might be a few drug users in those towns, but as soon as people start to come together in those small towns and assess the threat, at that point you know it's real. And communities will start working together to keep what you're talking about, groups of people from coming through. Now, it might sound really bad that you're going to kick people to the curb and make them keep walking down the street, but that's exactly what they did during the Great Depression. No groups of men here, no work available. Keep your asses going down the road. And whether it's women and children and families, too bad, you didn't get ready. And you're going to have to check your conscience at the door too. And your mind is probably going to fragment into, I can't be that person anymore. I need to like completely change my personality. We might have a bunch of multiple personality disordered freaks by the end of this whole thing as it moves through, because you're going to need to fragment your mind on the decisions you're going to need to make. But until that comes, everything's cool. But it is going to occur during Trump's presidency, this full-on liquidation and evaporation of the old system to bring in the new. But then again, how functional does the new system have to be in 2030? So that's the whole point. If you read the documents on where it needs to go, it needs to collapse from now slowly into a full like chasm down to the Grand Canyon, one giant drop off that paralyzes the world. And then we bounce back off of that as soon as we go down, and really it's like an under 3-month event. Right back out again. The re-emergence and the rebuilding of the economy under the new system will trickle, and then it'll be fully functional probably around 2030. So you put your own time frame onto that. So the things that have to happen during this, at least in my opinion, it can't be just one. Now take this for what it's worth. Keep the parts you think are valuable for you. Share if you want to. We have to go into a full global war where they can lock down all transportation. They need to come into such a heated conflict of kinetic that it stops all oil flow out of the Middle East at the minimum, and probably Indonesia also. And at the same time, we need to come in and paralyze the bank system and completely wipe it out where it's non-functional. And whatever was there, you lost forever. At that point, they're going to try to make good and say, well, everybody's previous bank balances are this. We can only offer you half, but it's under the new system, and you need to get all the digital biometrics done to assure it's you. Come up with a completely new identification system, all just to partake in the new system. And there comes your mark from the beast. They're probably going to tag you like a cattle to get this thing. So we already have a couple things in play as we speak into the chaos phase. Now, how quickly that's going to occur, that's another thing. That's an unknown, but I just don't see it in 25. 26, probably a lot more rumblings, because that collapse off the Grand Canyon, bounce back off, that I would say that's probably around mid-26 or early 26. But that's just me. And again, take for what you will out of the conversation.
Well, we know it's imminent, whether it's 2025 or 2026. We know it's around the corner here. It's not 5-10 years away. I think everyone listening to the show, and probably you and all your listeners probably agree with that too as well. So a lot to consider, and we're trying to stay on top of it as best we can. David, thanks so much for joining us.
How do you feed your families when the shelves are empty, the stores are shut, and there's no food available? What is the fastest, easiest, and most productive foods to grow? What is the quickest way to get somebody who has no skills at all up and running and producing very quickly? If you understand that we're at a point in history where it is no longer optional to be growing your own food, if you're like really freaked out and concerned because you've never grown food before and you don't have any skills, you don't know how to do that, but you know how important it is, then I want to let you know, however you stumbled here, you're in the right place. My name is Marjorie Wildcraft. I'm the founder of the Grow Network, and I have been the female leader in the survival and preparedness space for the last 20 years.
How to grow lots of food, even if you have no experience, are older and out of shape. This is for people who want the fastest and easiest ways to produce healthy and delicious meat, eggs, and vegetables. Because you know that growing your own food is like printing your own money. During this webinar, you will get status of global food shortages, how long the crisis will last, how much space you need to grow food, easiest, highest calorie foods you can produce, a complete plan for producing all the food you need, how to get started today, regardless of season. Marjorie will show you the fastest, easiest, and simplest ways to produce calories and nutrition, especially in a crisis and/or grid-down situation. The assumption is that you have no experience and you need to start producing food immediately. The most popular part of the webinar is the Q&A session at the end. So please come prepared with your questions.